Okay, I was hoping to get all the way through the Gideon section yesterday, which would include the chapter about his son Abimelech in chapter 9 of Judges. I didn't manage to do that. It took too long to get through 6, 7, and 8, which were actually about Gideon himself. So today I'm going to do chapter 9. I don't know if I'll be able to get on to... This is taking a little bit longer than I thought to get through this material. So I don't know if I'll be able to get on to Jephthah in chapter 11 or not today. But here we go. So this is Gideon's son. Gideon had a bunch of sons. He took many wives for himself, which, as we read in Deuteronomy 17, the king of Israel was not supposed to do. Now, he did not officially accept the title of king. See, Deuteronomy 17, verse 17. He, the king, this hypothetical future king that Moses is talking about, must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. Well, Gideon did do that. We read back in Judges 8, verse 24, he wanted their earrings, and as it turns out, they not only gave him their earrings, they gave him ornaments, pendants, this is in verse 26, and purple garments, and the chains that were on their camels' necks. Now, he did not officially accept the title of king, but for all intents and purposes, he is acting like a king. And in fact, this guy, his sons, most of his sons, of course, are not named. We only have a couple of their names. His oldest son is named Jether. We read about him in the previous chapter. He's got another son named Jotham that we'll read about a little bit later. And this guy, the main son's name here is Abimelech, which means my father is king. Now, it's possible he wasn't given that name at birth. It's possible that Abimelech was not called Abimelech at birth. That may not have been his birth name. That may have been a title or a king name that he received later. Oh gosh, you're going to knock this over, cat. Oh my goodness. It's possible that was a king name or a title that he received later on in life. It's even possible that it's a name that he is given by the writer of this book after his life. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But the name means my father is king, so it sure seems like Gideon is positioning himself as a de facto king, even if he's not a formal king. Anyway, so he had a whole bunch of sons, a whole bunch of wives, and he practiced idolatry. He took those materials, those gold earrings he was given, and made an ephod out of them, which is apparently and an ephod is part of the high priest's outfit. Apparently he was setting himself up as a kind of new priest, which was actually probably even worse than if he had accepted the role of king, frankly. No, there's... gosh. This is just something that... Yesterday, I wasn't bothered by the cats. I was able to actually get through my videos yesterday without being bothered by the cats. Today, no such luck. I was surprised. I was kind of wondering yesterday where they were, why they weren't bothering me. Today, I had no such luck. I need to trim your claws, cat. All three of you. Your claws are going to be trimmed. Nail trim later today for the cats. Yeah, you just stay right there. That's a good place for you. Good place for the cat. Okay. Abimelech, this is Judges chapter 9. Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, that's Gideon's other name, went to his mother's brothers in Shechem. Remember, Abimelech was the son of a concubine of Gideon. A concubine is basically, gosh, guys, come on. Oh, I got all these cats just everywhere. A concubine is basically a female companion that is not official, that is not quite a wife. We don't really have I guess you could almost call it maybe a mistress. Like, I'm not sure if we have an equivalent I've got cats just all over the place right now, and so I'm not sure if we have really an equivalent, maybe a mistress, like a female companion that you walk around with, who's not quite your wife. I'm not really sure if we have an equivalent of that in our society. This concubine is possibly not an Israelite. Gideon had many wives. My guess is that this concubine probably didn't become an official wife because she was a Canaanite, most likely. So Abimelech is probably half Israelite, half Canaanite. So he's probably going to the people in Shechem who are not full Israelites, and is appealing to their sympathies, most likely. Hard to say, though. The text itself doesn't actually say that. So we can't take that for granted, but it seems very possible. Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to his mother's brothers in Shechem, and said to them and to all his mother's clan, which again, these are probably not Israelites. His mother was probably a Canaanite. Ask all the citizens of Shechem, which is better for you, to have all 70 of Jerubbaal's sons rule over you, or just one man? So he wants to be king. Remember, I am your flesh and blood. He wants to be king. No question about it. Gideon, at least formally, refused that title. He effectively acted like a king, but he officially turned that offer down to become king. But this guy wants to be king. He's making a direct power play to set himself up as king. When the brothers repeated all this to the citizens of Shechem, they were inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, "He is our brother." They gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith. So this is a Baal temple. This is idolatrous money here. And Abimelech used it to hire reckless adventurers who became his followers. Other translations might use the word worthless in there. Basically just scoundrels. Wandering scoundrels who weren't good for anything but causing trouble. We have always had men like that in our society. You know, this fall, and this is October now, 2021, and this fall there has been a little bit of consternation about the lack of men going to college these days. Now, this was an obvious and easy to predict trend. You know, it's like, this does not surprise me. It should not surprise anybody, because this has been very obvious and easy to predict for a number of years. I mean, I went to college 20 years ago, and it was, at the time, easy and obvious to predict where we were going. So it's like this, to any rational, intelligent, observant person, this should not be a surprise. Unfortunately, these days we are led by a group of people who are not rational, intelligent, or observant, although they think they are all these things. Anyway, so this isn't a surprise to me, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but it is a surprise to some. And I've been reading articles about people who are surprised at this and are actually getting somewhat concerned about it. Now again, I don't know why. Our entire goal for the last 40 years has been to push men out of higher education, so I'm not sure why now all of a sudden that we're actually achieving our goal we're surprised or alarmed by this. But some people are, and it's been interesting reading some articles about this. And one of the things that some of the smart people are now worried about is that we're going to have, and this is true, I mean, this is legitimate, we're going to have a generation of young men without higher education who are going to be restless young men without high-paying jobs, without anything to do. And those kinds of men can be very dangerous. And they can be. And they always have been. Those kinds of men, without a clear purpose or aim in life, can be very dangerous. And so I think these are the sorts of men that Abimelech is recruiting here. They obviously aren't college dropouts of their society, but these are the guys that don't really fit in with the rest of the culture. These are the guys that have been kind of pushed to the outskirts. And now Abimelech is using them as his little own private army. Excuse me. He went to his father's home in Ophrah and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers. I'm not entirely certain what that means. Did he line them up and hang them? Did one stone? Did he pile all their bodies on one big slab? I don't really know what that means. Murdered his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal. I guess that would include this Jether, who was mentioned earlier. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, escaped by hiding. Somehow he must have seen this attack coming and got out in time, or else he wasn't there to begin with. I don't know. Then all the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, must be a town nearby, I guess, gathered beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem to crown Abimelech king. Now, if you remember what Shechem is not just some random city. Shechem has a history. In Joshua 24, verse 1, it says, Then Joshua assembled all the tribes of Israel at Shechem. And that's where he gave them his final speech and their final commitment. Their final commitment to the covenant with God, which of course later generations would not follow. That generation may have, the later generations did not. Joshua 24, verse 25. On that day Joshua made a covenant for the people, and there at Shechem he drew up for them decrees and laws. And Joshua recorded these things in the book of the law of God. Then he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak near the holy place of the Lord. See, he said to the people, this stone will be a witness against us. It has heard all the words the Lord has said to us. It will be a witness against you if you are untrue to your God. Then Joshua sent the people away, each to his own inheritance. So this is the same place. This is Shechem. I don't know if the great tree or pillar here, or this Joshua stone pillar, or the oak that he said by, could be. Doesn't explicitly identify it as such. It says a large stone, set it up there under the oak. Here it says, beside the great, they gathered beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem. I don't know if it's the same tree and stone or a different tree and pillar. But it's the same place. So this place has a history. This is not just some random place. This is not a place we've not seen before or heard about before. This is a place that has a history. And now has a history of bloodshed, violence, and rebellion. When Jotham was told about this, he climbed up on the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted to them. Now remember, Gerizim is also a place with a history. This is not a random place either. Joshua, when they came into the land, they went to these mountains. I have an itch in my finger. Okay, where am I here? Here we are. Joshua 8. This is after they just conquered Ai. So they fought 2 battles so far, Jericho and Ai. Then Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites. He built it according to what is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of uncut stones, on which no iron tool had been used. On it they offered to the Lord burnt offerings and sacrificed fellowship offerings. There, in the presence of the Israelites, Joshua copied on stones the law of Moses, which he had written. Joshua liked stones. He was a stone guy. All Israel, aliens and citizens alike, with their elders, officials, and judges, were standing on both sides of the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, facing those who carried it, the priests who were Levites. Half of the people stood in front of Mount Gerizim, and half of them in front of Mount Ebal, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had formerly commanded when he gave instructions to bless the people of Israel. The Mount Gerizim people, let's see here, where are we? Back in Deuteronomy now. This is Moses' farewell address to the people, Deuteronomy 27, starting in verse 11. On that day, that same day, Moses commanded the people, when you have crossed the Jordan, these tribes shall stand on Mount Gerizim to bless the people. Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin. And these tribes shall stand on Mount Ebal to pronounce curses. Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. So Mount Gerizim has a history too. This is where the people stood, half of them at least, to pronounce blessings when they first came into the land. And now Jotham is going to be standing here and to pronounce a curse. So he climbed up on the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted to them, listen to me, citizens of Shechem, so that God may listen to you. One day, now this is like a fable here. He's going to tell them a story here. One day, the trees went out to anoint a king for themselves. They said to the olive tree, be our king. But the olive tree answered, should I give up my oil, by which both gods and men are honored, to hold sway over the trees? So the olive tree has better things to do with its time than be king over the trees. It has a good and proper function to fulfill that it does not want to be distracted from in order to be king over the trees. Next, the trees said to the fig tree, come and be our king. But the fig tree replied, should I give up my fruit, so good and sweet, to hold sway over the trees? So again, the fig tree has a proper function to fulfill that is more important than being king over the trees. Then the tree said to the vine, come and be our king. But the vine answered, should I give up my wine, which cheers both gods and men, to hold sway over the trees? Now, they would have drunk wine all the time back in this culture. That would have actually been one of their primary things that they drank. They didn't have the sort of fermentation process that we have today, so their wine wasn't as strong as our wine is, but that would have been what they drank primarily. And the vine also has more worthwhile things to do than be king. It's here to produce wine. So it does not need to give up that job to be king either. Finally, all the trees said to the thorn bush, or the bramble, come and be our king. Now, the thorn bush, of course, was the lowliest of plants, down on the ground, full of thistles and thorns. A result of the curse, actually. Way back in Genesis 3, God says to Adam, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. So the thorns and thistles are the result of the curse. This is a plant that has no useful function. This is a plant that's only here to cause trouble and be a nuisance. And they're so desperate for a king that they even turned to the thorn bush to be their king. And the thorn bush said to the trees, if you really want to anoint me king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. And the thorn bush really wouldn't have had any shade. But if not, then let fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon. The cedars of Lebanon were the greatest of all trees. In fact, to this day, Lebanon, I believe, uses a cedar as its national symbol and its national flag. I think the forests of cedar of Lebanon are long gone, or at the very least they're reduced to almost nothing. But the national flag of Lebanon, if I'm not mistaken, still has a cedar a cedar tree in it as its symbol. So these are the great, all throughout the Bible, all throughout the Old Testament, you're going to see this imagery of the cedars of Lebanon being like the greatest and mightiest of all trees. Today, we probably would think of it as similar to like the American redwood out in California. These enormous trees that have been around for thousands of years. Now, if you have acted honorably and in good faith, so he's saying that this thorn bush is going to accept being king, but if they're not going to follow him, he's going to burn them all up. The thorn bush, of course, stands for Abimelech, obviously. And the trees, of course, are the people of Shechem. Now, if you have acted, now he's done with this parable, he's done with this fable, now he's just going to talk to the people directly. If you have acted honorably and in good faith when you made Abimelech king, and if you have been fair to Jerubbaal and his family, and if you have treated him as he deserved, which obviously they have not, and they know it, and to think that my father fought for you, risked his life to rescue you from the hand of Midian, but today you have revolted against my father's family, murdered his 70 sons on a single stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his slave girl, king over the citizens of Shechem, because he is your brother. If then you have acted honorably, and again, that's, of course, they haven't, they know this, and in good faith toward Jerubbaal and his... I have a hard time with that name, because there's a guy later in the Old Testament called Zerubbabel, and that's a much easier name for me to pronounce, and it just rolls off the tongue, my tongue at least, a little bit better than Jerubbaal. So I have to kind of stop and make sure I pronounce Jerubbaal without sounding it like Zerubbabel. And in good faith, and have acted honorably and in good faith toward Jerubbaal and his family today, may Abimelech be your joy, and may you be his too. But if you have not, and they have not, obviously, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume you, citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from you, citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, and consume Abimelech. Then Jotham fled, of course, because they're going to find him and kill him. They're going to string him up by his toes after that, escaping to Beer, and he lived there because he was afraid of his brother Abimelech. We're never going to see Jotham again. His prophecy will come true, literally in a sense, because fire will come from Abimelech to destroy the people of Shechem. Abimelech will not be destroyed by fire, but he will destroy the others by fire. So the prophecy is actually going to come true, and at least partially literally. But he doesn't do it. He does not cause the fall of Abimelech. In fact, we never see Jotham again. I don't know what he did with the rest of his life. But just because Abimelech falls, which he does eventually fall, doesn't mean that Jotham himself is elevated to his status or anything like that.